From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, October 29th. You're listening to the Macrocast. This is Tony Fratto in New York. We have Brendan Walsh, John Fagan from Markets Policy Partners in DC. October 29th is always kind of a special day. I mean, we're not expecting any big market moves. October 29th has like the long history of, depression, like big depression blowout in the market, but we're not going to see that today. I think we're going to see probably a fine market today, probably modestly. It's modestly down right now, but we'll see where it goes from here. We are seeing like lots of drama though in Washington on what's happening on economic policy making. We've been talking about this for weeks now. We're going to be talking about it for weeks to come because they punted yesterday on some a new plan by the president. They're one of the deadlines that they and Congress have been facing on trying to get the infrastructure bill done and the reconciliation bill developed and done was this ticking clock of President Biden going to the climate discussions in Scotland, they set this artificial deadline of trying to get these things done so he could show up with accomplishments, put himself in a better bargaining position. That's not happening, obviously. The drama was that he delayed his departure to go to Congress and present a new plan and to not quite cajole the Democratic caucus to vote for the infrastructure bill that Speaker Pelosi was putting on the floor yesterday. There was a lot of questions as to whether he was or was not encouraging Democratic members to actually vote for it. A lot of them said they would have voted for it if he had asked them to, and he never asked them to. He said he supported both of them and talked about the new reconciliation bill proposal that he had. So, I know in the way it's being, described in the media yesterday and this morning is that this was a colossal failure, and that what was Pelosi thinking? What was Biden thinking? Wasn't it embarrassing for him to go up to the Hill and do another meeting with Democrats and not get their support on the things that he clearly wants? And the truth of the matter is, from my perspective, is that, and you guys have, said it's like, something's going to get done. I think we all think something is going to eventually get done. But things cannot get done until everyone has fought their fights, and a
really important point.
Yeah, you cannot cave on your ambitious goals. You need to. You can't just tell your partisans. You can't go back to your district and tell your partisans in a town meeting, like, look, we're not going to go after that thing because the votes just aren't there for it. Because then what you look like is a quitter and a forfeiter and not sufficiently committed to the cause. And but if you can go some weeks later and say, we held up that bill for 3 months, we blocked votes, we stuck together, we fought, and we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got as much as we possibly could. And that because you saw all the criticism we took, and all the names that we were called, and all the gnashing of teeth, and all of the fighting and arguments that went on. That we fought to the end for everything that we could possibly get. And so it's not about, telling your people what the future is going to be. It's showing them with your effort. And so the failures, I think, like yesterday, to me, that's the way lines get drawn in Washington. You go do those fights, and then you can clear off, some of the most ambitious plans and just focus on the things that are more in the middle. And that's the way you do it. And I think that's what we're seeing. They gave themselves another 6 weeks or so to discuss it by moving the having a vote to extend the transportation funding bill, authorization bill, and that gives that program another couple months lifeline, and that gives everybody more time to go and continue this fight until what will eventually be the very end.
And I think you make a really good point about you have to fight, because I don't think it's just the optics, but the narrative has been, we've been negotiating with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, and Biden created a package that was palatable to those two. And then the 40 progressives in the House were just supposed to roll over and take it. They might roll over and take it, but they can't do it right away.
Yeah, everybody's going to have to do some rolling, is what it is. Now that said, I do think that the Biden plan that he presented yesterday gets closer to what is going to be an eventual bill. It's got significantly scaled back spending plans from the earlier proposals. I still think there's going to be debate on what ultimately stays in, what grows in what form and over what time frame, and then on the tax side as well.
Well, I think that's the question I wanted to ask you. You're much more in the weeds on that. Is there anything in there on the tax side that you just see as unpalatable, or is these things that can kind of be passed and implemented?
There are a lot of things on the tax side that I think are unpalatable. Just stipulate that on the front end. I think I don't like the direction they're going on tax policy. But to me, the one that sticks out as the most unreasonable, and even made the point yesterday, and I know some of the tax experts agree with this. The 15% minimum corporate tax on book profits. It's bizarre. It's always been a kooky idea. It is a kooky. It's very hard to score because it creates dynamic actions on the parts of companies to go do other things. Yeah,
I just don't understand how you would implement it. Even
I don't either.
Irrelevant of whether I agree or disagree with the policy.
Well, look, I mean, it creates these absurd constructs where, Congress passes legislation creating tax preferences, and then it penalizes you for taking those tax preferences. It's crazy.
That sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like saying we're going to give, individuals, a standard deduction and an additional child tax credit, and a mortgage interest deduction and an energy credit if you buy an electronic vehicle. But if your taxes go to zero, we're going to tax you 15% anyway. It's like, well, why would you do the EV? If you don't get the benefit for it anyway, if you still have to pay a tax, right? What use is the EV credit in that case? And it's exactly the same thing with companies, so there are certain things that they maybe they won't do. Now you could say, well, they're going to do them anyway. And it's like, well, why do you have any tax preferences in that case? Yep. If you believe that companies are going to do these things anyway, get rid of all the tax preferences. So you say look, R&D tax credit, or investment in climate conservation, activities. We're going to give you a tax exclusion or tax credit for those things, and then say, oh well, we're going to tax you anyway. Now, you either believe that there is a tax, the tax incentive has a dynamic impact on the capital allocation decisions of companies, or you don't. You can't believe both things at the same time. So if you believe that tax incentives that way work, and they do incentivize companies to do more in those areas, and then you harm them for taking advantage of those incentives, you need to also believe that they're going to do less of those things. And is that what you really want? Do you really want them doing less of those things? And if you believe that, and again, I know I'm repeating myself, but if you believe they're not going to do less of those things, then you're just creating a rent through the tax code, and you should just get rid of the preferences altogether, And so it's a confusing tax code. That policy is bizarre. in the extreme. And also it's sort of like, you wonder whether, the thing that inspired it from President Biden and Elizabeth Warren is the fact that companies will report to their investors, they have earnings this week, and they report their income and they report net income. And then, but to the IRS, you report your income, but you also show your, credits that you've carried forward from previous years that reduce your tax in that tax year. Well, like those are completely rational things that are, built into the tax code for companies. No one's trying to hide the ball or trick or do anything. And if it's a reporting problem, I guess maybe we can report to investors the other number if that's what you want. We'll just report the other number, and then now we have nothing to hide. Just report the other number, put it on a different line item, and then now you don't have this disparity that you all are worried about. The market can calibrate itself on how it thinks about those things as well. They do it anyway.
Well, I think that we're in this position. Well, obviously, the Biden administration is committed to the 15% global minimum tax. And so they have to do something that is roughly aligned with that. And, this is the vehicle that they're going to do it. So there are definitely some competing, some competing priorities there. And the other thing is that Senator Sinema came and absolutely torpedoed the tax proposals that had come in, and not just in the kind of way that Senator Manchin and some of the moderates had done, and making sure that it didn't go up to 28% and something gentler like 24, 25. She said no way, no day on some on that kind of corporate tax increase and a personal tax increase, and she didn't say that in March. Yeah. She didn't say that in May. She didn't say that in Senator
July. Is, I think, the most interesting person in the world. She's just fascinating.
What? So some of the reason that there's the reason that they're wrapped around they would be struggling with revenues probably anyway, but it has taken some of the Senator Sinema and her mercurial approach to this negotiation has taken a very challenging period of time. Put the degree of difficulty on getting revenue and pay for is just so much higher. So
it's funny how people are perceived based on where they sit, right? I mean, we saw Mitt Romney a la Ted Lasso yesterday. One of the funniest things ever. Deliver his morning biscuits to the boss to Kirsten Sinema yesterday morning. If you haven't seen it on Twitter, go to Mitt Romney's Twitter feed and you'll see it, because it's hysterical. And if you're not familiar with like Ted Lasso, go watch Ted Lasso. What are you people doing? So you need to go. You have some catching up to do. But it was hilarious, right? But it's funny how she's become the darling of Republicans now because of her her strong back on these policies. But if she was a Republican today, she would be she would be like the moderate Republican that Republicans hate. But they love her as long as she's a Democrat.
It's such a good point.
Yeah.
She seems to be having fun.
I think so. I know a lot of people in Arizona. I know a lot of people in the business community in Arizona. They've dealt with her for a very long time since she was in the state Senate in Arizona, and they say she's very consistent. These are her beliefs. She does believe that she wants to see companies be competitive and doesn't like, taking whacks at them in the tax code, and sees the benefit of that. At the same time, she's as green as anybody in Congress. She wants to see climate addressed and other very traditional Democratic issues. So look, I mean, I think she also knows her state. And
that's a good point. Arizona politically is a red state, but when you're in the middle of the desert, you have to be aware of the environment.
Yeah, she knows. I think she's representing her state very, pretty well. I think she's, that's what she's doing, and no one should be surprised by that. And I don't see anyone else, sort of sacrificing, their seats in order to meet some ideal. I don't see anyone on the other side doing that either. So, but look, that's where we are.
So do you think Pelosi can get? So now it's really all about the House, right?
I think it is. Well, I mean, they're going to have to come to an agreement on the reconciliation bill in the Senate for the House to move on the infrastructure bill, and so we're not there yet. I mean, even like I think the Biden proposal was a contribution that got everyone closer to talking about the same kinds of things. I think they threw out a lot of items that aren't going to be, that we're not going to make it into a final plan that I think are essentially off the table now. And I think the guys like Warner, Senator Warner and Coons and others who are more centrist Democrats just want to take a little bit more time with what Biden proposed yesterday. They have concerns. I think Sinema does also, about some of the unintended consequences of some of the provisions. They recognize that it was sort of a mad scramble, Chinese menu of throwing tax proposals together to try to get to the revenue numbers to make it look like it pays for itself. Some of these things are going to be really tough to score, and they want to talk about some of the problems that might be caused with what the proposals do. So they want to take that time to at least work through those things.
So,
but I do think
that point is interesting. We did a call with Michael Steele and Stacey Kirk a couple of days ago, and Stacey was much more negative than I would have thought. She put it at 50-50, but her point was time is bad for the Democrats to pass this thing. The longer this thing goes, the less optimistic she is that they'll be able to do anything.
Yeah, Stacey. Maybe we should have had Stacey on today too. But Stacey and I talked about that yesterday, actually.
Yeah, and usually she's much more optimistic on just general life,
Yeah. So she and I disagree on this. I think you're right. Like Stacey thinks.
Yeah. But I also think that she's very much in the weeds, which sometimes can, we always talk, the sausage making. If you're talking to people on a minute-to-minute basis, that can almost be a bad thing, because you have to compromise to come to a deal, and when you compromise, you're mad about it.
Yeah, well, you know what? I don't know if anybody's really going to be happy in the end, except for Biden.
Yeah.
Except for Biden. Like Biden will be happy in the end. Biden's going to have, remember the infrastructure bill is a huge prize for them, the other, whatever ends up in
it doesn't really matter to Biden exactly what's in it, right?
He's going to be able to go out and look, I think for midterms, they're going to be able to go out and talk about the things that they're doing, but especially for him, by the time he is running for reelection, assuming he's running for reelection, you're going to be able to look at substantive things that are actually getting done. And he's going to be able to go out and, cut ribbons, at least to start projects, and, take funny pictures with hard hats on and things like that. And, those things are going to happen in, soon enough time for him. And look, we've been talking about, we shouldn't discount how important the infrastructure bill is when it eventually gets done, because we've been talking about it for 15 years, like a long time. There's a lot of infrastructure.
No, and that's a good point too, because so much of the narrative has just been how much it costs, and we've kind of forgotten exactly what's in it. And especially the bipartisan bill, there's absolutely essential things in and the reconciliation bill that we really need.
Yeah, the Democrats aren't particularly adept at selling their policies. We've seen this again and again. It's not they're necessarily the great strength of the party. But if there is if obviously, this is something that they're going to run on in the midterms, and anything that falls off the back of the truck, as we said, is carved out, is also going to be, vote for us. And these are the things that we will prioritize.
Right.
We couldn't get passed. But, the reality is right now they're sort of, as Brendan said, sort of the darkest before the potential dawn. Of course, it may be the darkest before it gets even darker for the Democrats.
Right.
Sure. But on the political scene,
it is pretty dark here in DC.
Yeah, we on the political scene, we talked about the governor's race in Virginia. So just before we break, I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Tony. There was a little bit of back and forth we had with Steele and Stacey on this, and obviously, to some extent, it's being taken as a bellwether for the Democrats' fortunes writ large. But Steele made the point that this is a very micro race. It's on some very specific issues that are maybe like kids and masks and that sort of stuff, which is, let's bet it's probably a little bit more virulent now than it will be a year from now. And Youngkin has run a really good campaign. So what's your take?
But especially the fact that a lot of states last year didn't go back to school and some did. And the ones that did, it was successful. A lot of parents are voting very, very specifically on that issue. So you're voting Republican at the state and local level because you're mad about what they did with the teachers union. But that doesn't necessarily bleed through to how you would vote at the federal level.
Yeah, I think I think right now McAuliffe is, becomes a, sort of proxy for people's frustrations with having to deal with COVID. And
yes.
And, and so I think I think John said you used the phrase that's sort of like micro. Did you say that? Yeah. There are a lot of different things going on in this race. And we've seen a lot of these off-year elections, usually Virginia. I remember going back to 1994, there was a, the race to fill the seat of John Hines, who had died in a plane crash, was Harris Wofford and Governor Senator Thornburg, who had been appointed to the seat. It was an interim election that was a bellwether. It was in 91, was a bellwether for 92 and the Clinton victory, and elevating healthcare as a big issue. So you could see some of these races as being much bigger demonstration. I agree with your point on this, is that there are some really like inside state kinds of issues here that are having a play in this race that have little to do with Biden and Biden policy.
No, I know.
Biden is down in the
just
state.
Personally, my wife told me that if our kids didn't go back to school in September, she was never voting for another Democrat ever again in her life.
Yeah, there's that kind of anger that has not. And that's Biden
anger
policy
for a whole year of dealing with it. Yeah, and seeing her friends in states that sent their kids back to school and had a normal life or semi-normal life.
Now you have this issue with the this debate over parental control over what books kids are reading in schools.
Yeah, that ad by Youngkin is a powerful one, where McAuliffe, he just keeps replaying McAuliffe saying, I don't think parents should have a role. And I think it was taken out of context, but it's a very powerful political ad.
It's out of context. I think they're completely wrong on the issue, and that you cannot, you need to have a curriculum and a syllabus that's broadly accepted. And if you don't like that, you should go to the private schools that are your choice. And you can't have teachers like micromanaging every class as to what books students read. So I think they're wrong. It is a very powerful ad.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
because
powerful.
It makes it seem much more like it's the COVID issue, not a book issue. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, that issue has nothing to do with Biden, right?
No.
That said,
exactly.
Biden is down, and so what is the impact? I don't think members should read into that they shouldn't pass the reconciliation bill, right? I mean, it's like it doesn't.
Good point.
Doesn't follow to me that that we're not going to do the if you're a Democrat, I'm not going to vote for the reconciliation bill because of this governor's race in Virginia. If you are, I mean, maybe that's an indication for Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, where there's a lot of associated issues that she has to deal with. It's not obvious to me why Tom Lamb in Pennsylvania would vote against a reconciliation bill because of what happened in Virginia.
Stacey's fear was that if Youngkin wins, you could have a lot of Democratic Congress people that just decide not to run because the writing's on the wall. So why bother running and losing and being in the minority?
And then the complication of this all happening during a congressional redistricting cycle as well.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll know next week, and
yeah, it's 4 days away, so it's not like we have to wait too long.
It'll be fun. We have a lot to talk about next week then. All right, let's come back after the break and take a look at what's going on with earnings and data. You're listening to the HPS Macrocast.
Every 2 weeks, HPS measures U.S. adults' feelings and expectations for the economy. The Civic Science Economic Sentiment Index, powered by HPS, accurately measures movements in overall national economic sentiment and provides a more sophisticated alternative to existing economic sentiment indices. To learn more, contact us through hamiltonplacestrategies.com.
All right, back on the Macrocast. We're in earnings season. John, what are you hearing from? What did you see this week? What are the signals this week?
Yeah, this week was a really big week. It had the big heavy hitters from tech. That was the headline.
Bang.
Yeah, and but we also had some very consequential household names like Ford and so forth coming out. And so this was a week
Ford
where
crushed it, right?
Crushed it.
Yeah,
Stock was up
really
10%. Yeah.
It was really a make or break week for earnings season. And you gotta weigh the good with the bad here, but I think it was more make than break. And certainly equities hitting all-time highs a couple of different times this week are a testament to that. But that comes with, the context that we saw, which was coming into earnings season, there was a lot of sensitivity to just what the supply bottlenecks, labor shortages,
exactly,
all the input costs, you name it, all the stagflationary environment. Is this really going to be coming in and pinching margins? Are companies going to be able to deal with it? And writ large, you'd have to say that companies appear to be dealing with it pretty well.
No, you're 100% right. Ford is a perfect example. Their CEO did an incredible job about sourcing semiconductors, and they had record production. Microsoft also, because Microsoft kind of does it on their own, so they didn't have any issues. But today we see Apple shares down a bunch, and it was on supply chain issues. They weren't able to produce as many phones as they wanted because they weren't able to get the sourcing. Yeah,
and Amazon cited the labor costs.
One too. Yep.
Yeah, the shortages of labor, the shipping bottlenecks, that sort of stuff, and
Amazon's so big that they just can't escape it, essentially.
Yeah. Both Amazon and Apple sort of flashed forward to the fourth quarter with some relatively sober kind of guidance, and their stocks are down, but this is not a catastrophe. They're not down.
They've also been up like 50%. So
yeah, well, I mean, the two of them aren't up that much this year, but it's been overall, it's been an earnings season that a lot of dogs haven't barked. And the kinds of companies that you would see, like the industrials companies, that sort of thing, and Ford, the automakers, coming out and saying that, revealing that they're still extremely profitable and demand is super strong. And that this is
when I write the summaries of the earnings, it still just hits me so hard. It's like we earned $30.4 billion in the quarter. Like everybody does that. It is kind of mind-boggling how much American corporations make,
Yeah. And they're adapting, as Brendan said, they're adapting to these problems and managing them. These are, from our perspective, all the bottlenecks and stuff and these supply chain issues. When you say, well, these supply chain issues have gone on longer than anyone thought, I think you can take supply chain issues out and put in pandemic, and basically
exactly
those two are linked. And the better public health outcomes over the coming quarters, knock on wood, will be shown through and feed through into some of these labor shortages. And
also, a lot of the supply chain issues, especially like the Port of Los Angeles, That has entirely to do with a local ordinance where you're not allowed to stack more than two containers on top of each other. So we have a massive amount of containers that are waiting to be unloaded. So there's only 7 cranes working right now. And it's not because we don't have people to work the other ones. It's because we don't have enough trucks. So luckily a guy who's a logistics pushed it and they changed it. Now you can stack like 8 of them. And it's going to go a long way to helping undo this. So it kind of goes back to the issue with the Fed and inflation, where people are like, oh, the Fed's behind the curve. What in God's name is the Fed raising or lowering rates have to do with the local ordinance in Los Angeles that is creating a bottleneck?
There is a question though, and I think, Bridgewater has a note out on this a bit, and look, whatever you want to call the constraint, right? Like it's the problem, it's not except for, chips are an issue, but we should remember that like demand is off the charts, right?
Yeah.
So your point on this, right? Like why are there all these companies making money? Because like everything they push out the door, somebody has money to buy their stuff. It doesn't matter like what it is, like whatever it is, push it out there. Someone's there to buy it. We bought a car recently, and we only have one key for it. Kind of a risky proposition today because like replacing a key is pretty expensive, and
you keep your phone
dangerous.
on 5% charged.
Exactly. Like it's scary, right? Like this one key, it's like we should keep it in plexiglass, and, because if you lose it, it costs like, these keys are like, super important. It costs like $700 to replace a key. It's crazy, but we only have one key because that's one way that they've, because of the chip shortage, right? They don't have chips to give you 2 keys. So they give you one, and sometime in the future, they're going to mail us another key, It's like, but the problem is like they wouldn't have done that. I don't think they would have sold us a car 2 years ago with only one key, that's a little thing, let alone the other things. But demand is still really high. So what is the obligation of the Fed in that situation?
And actually, so there was a survey from the Fed today. So there's 5 million people that are out of work directly because of COVID. Like 2 million people had COVID, couldn't go to work. 3 million or another 1 million didn't go to work because they're scared of COVID. And then 2 million were caring for somebody that had COVID. Basically, all of those 5 million people plan to come back to the workforce. So we will be able to meet the labor shortage sometime in the
my
future.
Question on that, Brendan, though, is, shouldn't the Fed be taking away some easy money?
There's 2 issues. There's quantitative easing, and then there's raising rates. They definitely. Well,
definitely not raising, but like should they be removing accommodation?
Yes,
and that's a signal to. Right, future remove accommodation to just take the top off demand a little bit, and I'm not there, right? I'm still where, like I'm probably too, I believe in Jay Powell's story, and I'm willing to stay. I'm staying on the boat. I'm staying on the SS Powell. I'm not jumping ship. Yeah, I think he's. I agree with. I like his story, and I like where he's heading, and I have faith in.
And that's what he's told you, that we're going to start either next week at the Fed meeting or in December. So we kind of think that they actually don't do it in November. They announce they're going to do it, and then they start in December. But one way or the other, we're going to start this process in the next 3 months. Well, you're also doing this in the face of Treasury issuance that is going to fall off a cliff because we printed so much money to deal with the pandemic that we need a couple trillion less this year than we do. So it is time to buy less bonds because also we're going to be issuing less.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Well, the communication where the Fed has sort of flopped in its communications is delinking the taper from rate hikes. They have been They've really pushed this. Even the hawks have talked about it, but the market is just not buying it. And part of the reason they're not buying it is because even like Fed Chair Powell has sort of gone wobbly on this transitory thesis, and is clearly, is clearly not as convinced as he used to be. He did not project last week in his remarks a lot of, a firm hold. President Lagarde at the ECB has been more forceful in her statements that, this is transitory, even though it's dragging on a little bit longer. It's still the exact same kinds of dynamics. And there's concern about, there's obviously the longer even a temporary inflation condition lasts, the potential for it to have second order effects on expectations. But, the idea that the Fed is, going to be, kind of charging into the taper here, even after two pretty squishy non-farm payroll reports and a third quarter GDP that looked, not so hot. And everybody expects, the economic conditions to pick up. But, the drumbeat of concern, it's not just the Fed. We've seen, obviously, the Bank of England get very hawkish. We saw the Bank of Canada go cold turkey on their quantitative easing program. And there's a sense that global central banks are kind of saying one thing on inflation and doing another. And so people are in the market.
Well, interesting on the RBA, it was the market that pushed them to stop buying because they just couldn't hold it. They were trying to keep the front end at 0.1 and it was trading at 0.5, and they just basically threw their hands up and said, fine. And
but when you look at the shape of the curve isn't telling you that the markets think this is the right move.
I agree.
The front ends are going up, the back ends are falling, and the curve is flattening, which is basically saying, the Fed is losing, and the global central banks are sort of losing their faith in the transitory thesis, sort of wrongly, and that they should wait rather than rush into some of the
and when we talk about the curve, that means that the like 1 month, 1 year, that those prices go up because they think that rates will go up. But then the longer dated, 5 and 10 years go down because you're predicting essentially a recession in the future.
Or slowing growth. Now we haven't inverted. We're not close to inverting, but it's definitely
no. But just to explain the concept behind it.
Actually, curve. To be fair, the 20s, 30s have inverted. And so, 20 is a little wonky. So let's not put too much into it.
I was more referring to Australia than the US, but yes, exactly.
Yeah, but it definitely sends shivers around the market when you see the yield curve torquing that much flatter, and it's not necessarily the market blaring warnings about a policy mistake, but definitely pricing in a greater likelihood that this is suboptimally tight, not just in the Fed's case, but in Bank of England and some of the ones that are really going into rate hikes quite quickly.
And it's always joked that an inverted yield curve has predicted 7 of the last 3 recessions. But on the flip side, every time we have gone into recession, we do get an inverted yield curve.
Yeah, we actually, we did have an inverted yield curve and we did have a recession. And no, we had a pandemic intervening also, but
and what, $5-6 billion in stimulus.
yeah. All right, guys. What about next week? What do we have next week?
Big week next week. We have the Fed on Thursday, and then non-farm payroll on Friday.
Can't wait.
Monster
it's going to be a big day. It is going to be a big day. This is actually the one I was waiting for more than.
This is by far the most
influential.
Next week is probably the biggest week of the entire year in terms of economics and markets.
And politics. We're going to have a lot. We're going to have a lot next week. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
We'll have a much different view of the world come Friday than necessarily we think of it today.
Definitely.
Well, in the meantime, have a happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, guys. Trick or treat.
Candy.
Trick or treat. All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.